Hi, and welcome to my channel, A Breath of Life. Here I have my husband, Taylor. Taylor, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to just talk to you guys about my healing and the healing that occurred in my lungs. Some of you know from my last little episode that I have been given a diagnosis of cystic fibrosis. And what that is it's a genetic disease where it affects your lungs, your digestive system. Basically, the mutation affects the mucus in your body. It creates sticky, thick mucus. And how this affects the lungs and the digestive tract is that it produces too much. And so the mucus accumulates in the lungs, and then it causes lung infections, inflammation, all this other stuff. And so if I got sick, a virus entered my body or bacteria was taking over, the first thing that would happen would be just all of that bacteria and stuff would become accumulated in one spot, and that's where the infection would occur. And sometimes it would travel into different parts of the lung, so I'd end up with an infection in this part of my lung or an infection in this part of my lung. And so part of why I wanted to have Taylor here and talking with me through this, because he's been the witness to everything in my journey with cystic fibrosis, the struggle with cystic fibrosis, and then the healing that God brought to me and was promised to me. So let's start just kind of back, like in the very beginning of when Taylor and I first met.
Okay.
So we're going to start it from the beginning, and we're going to hear what Taylor has to say.
Okay. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
All right. I would just say that when I first started dating Caitlin, before when we had first met, I had no idea what cystic fibrosis was. I had no idea what I was getting myself into. When we had first started dating, just the hospital visits, I remember studying cystic fibrosis and looking into what she had had, and just that the fear that came along with that, it was very, very scary for me at first. It was something that I didn't want to face my wife having. I would be at work. I would get calls from her while she was in the hospital. Things like that. It bothered me. It bothered my soul on so many levels. Like, just the knowing, like, is she going to be all right? And to look at medicine in the way that it made me think, what these doctors were doing was what was best for her at the time.
Like our savior.
Yeah.
The medicine was our savior at the time. The only option.
I would always encourage her, every time that she was feeling sick, I would say, then just go, let's take you to the hospital. That was pretty much my first go-to. And the beginning years of our relationship, there was a movie with Jake Gyllenhaal that I had watched previous to us getting together, and we watched it again when we were together, but it was Love and Other Drugs, and it was about him working at Pfizer Corporation and him falling in love with a woman that had Parkinson's. And there was a scene in that movie that it scared the crap out of me. He was talking to somebody at a meeting, and this guy was much older, and he had a wife that had Parkinson's. And he had said, if I was to go down this road again, would I go down it? And it scared the crap out of me. But even, we had our first child, and it almost killed her. We were doing IV antibiotics at home, hanging IV bags from the ceiling. Very scary. Very scary. Our second child, she was lacking oxygen. We almost lost Scarlett. It was also very scary. And to think, that this disease might kill her. And this was before I was just starting to become a Christian. I was just starting to learn about my faith. But there was still that spirit of fear in me.
In the beginning of our journey with God, we had given our lives at this church, and we had a married couple friends tell us, "You're going to be healed. I feel it in my bones. God's going to heal you." And I didn't deny this. I would just kind of receive it as much as I could at that point in time, but I didn't understand fully at that point how God was going to heal this. It's genetic. The world says, it's incurable, it's a terminal disease, you're going to die early, and you're always going to suffer, and this is just the way that it is, get used to it. And so when I had these people telling me, He's going to heal you, we know it, we feel it, you're going to be healed, and they were praying over me, and I just started to kind of align myself with that path, okay, fine. I had been praying that He would come to the Lord, He came to the Lord, and then the second thing after that was, all right, now I'm going to be healed. Let's set on this path. And I became, consistent and steadfast in my prayer for healing. And so what happened was I started going to the church and having the elders pray over me, which is James 5:14. And that says that if any of you are sick, you are to go to the elders and have them anoint you with oil, place their hands on you, and have them pray over you for your healing. And so we did that, and I did it pretty consistently. And I wasn't healed, okay? So I knew that I just had to stay consistent with it, and it was just going to be in God's timing. And what I didn't know at that time was that God was orchestrating this plan, and it was from, His heavenly realm that He could see all of this playing out and orchestrating it, and I was in it. I couldn't see what was going on. I just knew that I had to trust. These people are telling me that God's going to heal me. It says in the Bible that God will heal you, and so I had to believe in that, and I had to trust that. So I started doing that, and then I went back to the hospital a couple times, and this put us into February of 2019, I think it was, and this was the last time I was in the hospital, and I had a vision, and God had showed me basically this all-knowing kind of vision that these nurses and these doctors were not helping me as much as I believed they were, and that they were actually hurting me. And on such a deep level. And so in that hospital room, he gave me this message, he gave me this vision, he took my fear of death. He explained to me, kind of why I wasn't feeling my angels, because I was so sick at this time. I had gotten the flu, and I really thought I wasn't, I wasn't sure what was going to happen. I mean, my doctors that were giving me all these medications, and this was the first time that I hadn't responded to the medicines very well. And I was really wondering, when am I going to get out of this hospital? I was actually getting worse as I was in the hospital. And so, there were thoughts of am I going to come out of here, And so I started praying I want to feel my angels and asking God to just kind of intervene on this. And so there was a lot that happened in that room. And I'll never forget that stuff. But basically, the vision was enough to separate me from the pharmaceutical industry at that time. And so when I got back home, I eventually started getting better. And I came back home, and I had to tell Taylor, I'm done. I'm done taking all these drugs. I'm done taking the inhalation therapies. I'm done with the albuterol. I'm done with the enzymes. All of this stuff that was pharmaceutically made, that was maintaining or basically treating my cystic fibrosis. And that was my crutch. That was my lifeline. And so for him, it was really scary for me to come home after, being really down and really, really sick and saying, I'm not going to take this anymore and I'm done. And so he had kind of told me are you sure you want to do this? It took him a little bit of time to really back me up on it and support it, but he eventually did. And we just kept trusting God. We just went into it, we just let it slowly start to happen, and slowly started just letting go of it, not taking control, and just believing that God was going to do what He had promised us. And so after that time, Taylor had a prompting from God to move up north. And so this moving up north thing didn't look like, oh, he had a job and we're moving up north and we're changing, careers, nothing. We had $10,000 in our savings account and we were like, we're moving up north and God's going to find us a place. And, we're just going to go up north. We moved an hour and a half away from our family and friends.
Yeah.
Out into what I called the wilderness, because he then took a pay cut. He got a job at Boeing. He took a pay cut. We were paying $500 more a month for rent, for a smaller apartment. This was city living.
Yeah.
And he was working from sunup to 1 a.m. and I'm at home with these kids by myself. Our second car broke down after we moved out to Linwood, so really in the wilderness, if you will, because we had no friends out there, we had no family out there. We had not found a church yet, but we knew this prompting was what we had to follow.
Yeah.
And so upon this, coming out into the wilderness, we found the church that we go to now. And what had happened was, what God knew all along. He was orchestrating it, and we were just obedient to that, and we just aligned with that, and we just trusted him. And really, our obedience was blessed greatly because we came into the proper group of friends. We came into our new family, and, this church just welcomed us with open arms.
Yeah.
And I went into this church on an off night for them. It wasn't a Sunday sermon. It was a Wednesday night prayer night, which was just an hour of group prayer with some people from the church. And I just remember walking in and it's this is it. I felt the presence of God in this place. I knew it was different. I knew this is where God was calling us to be. And I had 2 women approach me from the church and they asked me, what brings you to this church? And I said, healing. I'm here for healing. That is exactly what I said. And that is exactly what I knew I was there for. I just didn't know when or how that was going to happen. And so, a couple months went by. We went by 8 months had gone by where I hadn't gone to the hospital, hadn't gotten sick.
Yeah.
That was a celebration for us.
Yeah.
Because before that, it had only been every couple months I was in the hospital.
Yeah.
And then upon moving and doing this whole transition, it was 8 months that I hadn't been sick. And I'm like, wow, we're what's going on? Well, then the winter hit. So the winter hit and I got sick. Something hit me, some virus, something, and my lungs started getting really bad really quickly. And I just stayed steadfast in my prayer and just reaching out, for help. And this was the first time where I was I cannot go to the hospital. God does not want me to go to the hospital. I'm faced with this to stand on the word of God and what he has told me and what he's promised me against the world. Because I had so many Christian friends telling me, just go to the hospital. I'm worried about you. I was on the floor just gasping for air because I was so low with my oxygen. It had gotten so bad. And he looked at me and he's like, how am I supposed to trust God when you're sitting here in front of me struggling to literally breathe and be alive right now?
Yeah, it was very scary. The lung infections, typically it would take, 2 to 3 weeks of hospital visit, her being in the hospital, me taking time off of work for that time to take care of our kids. We didn't have a lot of help from our family at the time. So, every single lung infection she had, I had to take a leave of absence from work. We would go without pay. We would go for long periods of time. It was consistent. And this time when she had said that she was going to trust God, it was scary. It was very scary.
He had his mom call me.
Yeah, I talked to my mom a lot about, her walk with everything, and my mom also, was big for medicine, so to reach out and ask God for help and just not trust modern medicine was very scary. I was working 2 jobs, my construction job from 8 a.m. Till 3, and working at Boeing from 4 till 12:30. So I would be gone typically from 7 a.m. till 1:30 a.m. That's about right.
Yeah.
So long days away from my family, which ultimately, it drains Caitlin for me being gone for that amount of time and her being in charge of the household. That's a lot to handle.
But God had brought in...
God had brought in such a good group of people that
So
were reaching
amazing.
out. They were helping.
Yeah.
But one of the elders at the church had told Caitlin to trust God. And there was a time when she was struggling to breathe. And
I had literally leaned up against the washer.
yeah.
Like, I was lacking so much oxygen that I remember I leaned up, this was the day that I got healed, was when he said that to me, how are you trusting God when you literally are struggling in front of me? And then later that day, I had leaned up against the washer, and I remember talking to God, like, God, I cannot breathe. I know that you see what's going on, like all these people coming at me, telling me to just go to the hospital. And I said, I need you to heal me now. Like, heal me now, because I don't know how much more of this I can take, how low I was. Like, I was taking these deep breaths and not getting any oxygen. And so I became very loopy and very, very weak. And that time, like that moment, he goes, ask for prayer. And so I called Susan, one of the elders in our church, and she came over later that night. She came over with 2 other people, and they prayed over me for a good 30 to 45 minutes. And I literally went from feeling like 6 or 7 different spots in my lungs where I could feel the mucus, fluid, inflammation, everything. And then all of a sudden, I start feeling like in my spirit, God's like, you're not letting me in. And I'm like, oh my gosh, like I want this so bad, but I'm not accepting it. Like I'm not receiving this healing. And so he spoke to me like, let me in. And I literally felt this like shift in my body, like open up. And then him come into my lungs and just start drying all these spots up. And there was one little spot that popped, and it was like kind of weird. And I'm like, okay. And I remember Susan asking me, is it all dry? Like, how are you feeling? And I was like, well, most of it's dry, but then there's this one spot, like, it's not quite dry. And she said to me, God is a God of complete healing. And so we're going to keep praying until that spot is gone too. So we prayed for, I think, like another 15 minutes. And then it dried up. And to explain what that feels like, it's so... I don't even know how to explain it. I don't know how to put it in words. But for somebody with cystic fibrosis to say, like, my lungs are dry and I'm receiving full oxygen, it's not common. It's probably really unheard of, actually. Because, this thick, sticky, excessive mucus is always in there in some part or another, if not multiple. And so to have dried lungs, it was so weird. But then, as soon as, we start praising God, and as soon as they leave, I feel the enemy just come up to me, and he touches where that one part was like a pop. And he spoke like, this one's not quite dried up, is it? Like that, like this really snarky kind of comment. And I just rebuked him really quickly, and I was like, get out of here right now. Like, I just got healed. I'm fully healed. Like, these lungs are dried up. They're done. Get out of here. And I go back into the bath, and I'm just like praising God, because I had never felt in love with God until this moment. Like, I had a strong love for God, but this was like, oh my gosh, why me? Like, I'm not even worthy of this, and yet you've done it, and you love me so much, and I'm just like so like admiring what you have done for me. And like, I can't wait to meet you. Like, that was what grew inside of me, was like this strong desire to just like be with him and meet him. And no offense, honey, but just so in love with like what he has done, and how he's just like taken me, this kind of really wretched person, and then healed my lungs and just completely blessed me and my family. And so he came home because he worked, until almost 1 a.m. So he'd get home late in the morning. And so that next morning, I'm awake and he comes out and I'm like, honey, listen.
Yeah. And deep breaths. And it was clear. And to hear what she had sounded like previous to that, it was mind blowing. I mean, all we could do was thank God.
Yeah.
And to see how long she is gone now without going back to the hospital has taken away all fear. I mean, trust in God has taken away all fear of that. It's been just, yeah. I mean, I will always trust now that God has a plan for people.
Amen.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing. But just to think on how long it's actually been.
It's been like 1.5 years now.
Probably, yeah. Something like that.
Yeah. Since I've had a lung infection.
Yeah.
Since I've actually really been sick. I mean, there was 2 times I think I got kind of sick. And
bogged down.
Kind of just icky, but never anything. Not even close.
Yeah.
And now I've gained weight.
She went from being 100 and, 120, something
really
like that.
low. I'm 6 feet tall.
She's 6 feet tall.
So I was really, really thin. And now I'm
And she's back up to the weight
150.
Yeah, pre-pregnancy with
150.
Evelyn. When we had first met, she had weighed 150.
Which was really good. That's a really good weight for me, and being 6 feet tall and just not, people with cystic fibrosis often cannot gain weight because they malnourish, they don't absorb the foods that they eat. And so, after God healed my lungs, I just slowly started gaining weight and I've been keeping it on. And I mean, it's just amazing, what he's done. And to go from living in this encapsulation of I have cystic fibrosis, so we can't do this because I've got this, or all the limitations that were put on us as a couple, on me just as an individual, as a mother, as a spouse. It was gnarly. These doctors speak into your life and they tell you these things you can't do this because you have this, or this is going to happen to you because you have this, or, and a lot of it was side effects from the medications that they were giving me. And
me enabling, I would sit there and say, oh, well, honey, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. And she was fully capable of doing it. If she trusted in God and trusted in herself, that she has the strength, that God has given her that strength to do that. And
Amen.
To see the stuff that she does now, it's a complete 180.
Amen.
Yeah.
Isn't it 360?
360, 180.
But but in that time, we were so supported by this church, and just, these people would come and they would take my kids to the church and let them, participate in these children group activities and all this stuff, and give me the ability to actually rest my body. After I had received this healing, it was all of the toxins started coming out of my body. I was detoxing from all the pharmaceuticals. So I was tired. My lungs were completely clear, but I was still kind of weak. And so I knew, and it was actually God just showed me, you are weak and I am strong. And that's scripture. That's 2 Corinthians 12, I think 9 through 10. And it's for when you are weak, I am strong. And we are to basically just be glorifying him in our weaknesses. And that's exactly what I was doing, because every time I felt weak, every time I felt like I couldn't do it, it was I could just come to him and he just showed me what to do, how to take it on, what to do with my kids, how to say this, how to do that. Literally just giving me instructions and guiding me along the way as I would align my will with his. And so There was one day where I even went to take a nap. I had a friend from the church, she took my children. I'm like, yes, every single time my kids were gone, napping,
Yeah.
sleeping, resting. Like, really, I took that seriously. And I went into almost this deep sleep. And I remember, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is God. He was coming to me, like this big, bright, golden light. And I had just kind of dozed off. So I was in this position of like, my body was almost asleep. So I was more paralyzed, but I was still awake. Like I could feel things in my body, but I wasn't able to move. And all I could see was black. Like I could not open my eyes. And then I start seeing this light like coming towards me. And I just remember thinking, oh my gosh, like this is God. Like I'm in the presence of God, or like he's in the presence right here. And just like, he's with me right now. And I so badly wanted to nap that day. Like I really was about these naps. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, like God doesn't want me to take this nap. Like he wants me to see him. And actually I felt in my body just kind of like this major surrender. Like I don't know how to explain it, but just like this surrender in my spirit and just like this thankfulness and like gratitude within me and just like this awe, like, oh, like God is right in front of me. He's literally right in front of me. And then coming next to him, it was like this wave, like this like back and forth, but slowly making its way towards me was this little white light. And it was like, that was my guardian angel. And they just came and I just laid there and I just absorbed this. And I mean, it was just so intense, but like I woke up and I felt so energized. Like I hadn't even slept, but I was energized and I felt like the tears just rolling down my face. I couldn't open my eyes, but I felt the tears just rolling down the side of my cheeks. And it was just the weirdest thing. But why I tell you this is because we cannot see him, but we have to know that he is there and we have to trust that he is there. And I'm sure some people have experienced this. And, I did look it up after it was all over. And I did read online that, people had experienced this golden light, like this was God and all this other stuff. So for anybody that hasn't experienced that, I would definitely ask, because God does honor like these little prayers that we have, our little heart's desires, right? Like we can pray for things and we must pray in alignment to his will and be willing to accept that and living in that, because that's where the fruit comes from. But sometimes, he'll bless you with these little adventures, and it just grows you closer to him. It grows your trust, your love, and just your desire to really want to obey, what he says, what he instructs us to do, how we're supposed to be. And really that's just like being led by the Spirit. Mm-hmm. The fruit of the Spirit is that. It just manifests naturally in your life when you're obedient to him and obedient to what you hear. So that's that. It's been a long journey and we've been patient. And, honestly, you guys, like my husband, like we've only been married for a year and a half.
Yeah.
It's only been a year and a half, but we've been together for 6 or 7.
Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was just total chaos before that. But then once God, like, he just started talking to me out of nowhere. And then he brings my husband into it. And then we're married. And there's this big, long, story behind that. And I'll share that in another video. But I mean, the fruit of the Spirit, you guys, is real. In Galatians 5:22, the fruit of the Spirit is love, peace, forbearance, forgiveness, self-discipline. There's a couple more that I'm missing, but I mean, truly, that was one of the first things that I started experiencing in my life was the fruit of the Spirit. And so I just want to encourage anybody to really just yield your will to him. Just do it. Just surrender everything that you have and just watch what he does with your life. It's truly amazing. It really is. The power of God is so intense and it's so strong, and we limit him on what he can do. And I think one of the best things I ever did was, not deny that maybe he could heal me. Because I think so many people go, oh, God can't do this. Mm-hmm. Oh, God wouldn't do this. Why would he do this for me? Because we don't forgive ourselves. And that's probably one of the worst things you can do. Yeah. Is limit God, limit yourself. And I mean, truly, he is an amazing God. And Matthew 29:11, I think it is, with anything, it is possible with God. With God, it's possible. Anything on this earth, it is possible with God, and only God. And that's truth.
Yeah.
So, I love you guys. I love God. I love my husband. I love that God has changed us for the better. And I love that we are obedient to what he says, and we do, it's hard. It's really hard. Because our wills are strong. We have strong wills.
Yeah. Very strong.
Very strong. And when you get two people with strong wills and you're like this, like butting heads all the time, and then God comes in the center and it's like there's that 3-chord thing, and the 3 chords will never break. Because it is just, it's God's design.
Yep.
And so to live in that is where you want to be. I don't regret giving my life to God at all. I regret being atheist and not believing when people told me God spoke to them and that he was real and that he wanted to bless me and that he wanted to do all of these things. I regret not being open-minded to that. So for anybody that's watching and you're not a believer, like, just try it. What do you have to lose? Honestly, really, what do you have to lose? I can tell you right now, it's you'll lose nothing. You're going to gain everything.
Yes.
So, thank you for being on my channel.
Yep.
Thank you guys for watching. And I'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.